Presentation item number 2. You're up again, Matt. You have 3 minutes.
I won't make that. I'll try and cover everything concisely. So tonight's presentation on the budget can be kind of broken down in these different components. I'll kind of highlight the budget process, provide a financial update, have a discussion on budget highlights, and then present a couple of different mill rate scenarios for council to consider. So developing the 2025 budget, we started it back in March. I presented the preliminary results on the year-end financial report for 2023, just to kind of give a snapshot of where we were. And then in April, we discussed outside agency budget requests and also the capital improvement program. Here tonight, we're going to be focusing on kind of budget policy, some of the overall kind of things that are driving the overall budget, and then also the tax levy funds. And then on July 1st is the consideration of a resolution to exceed the revenue neutral rate and setting a public hearing. And then kind of a new addition to the budget calendar is a July 15th budget discussion on enterprise funds. And then the public hearings and approval process will vary depending on what council decides to do with the revenue neutral rate. But those will be in August or September. So on general fund revenues, one thing I want to point out is overall, revenues have been pretty flat. So 23 overall total general fund revenues were basically the same as 2022. We're projecting, we had to revise our projections down for 24 and 25. There's basically the revenue growth is about 3.2% over the 3-year period each year. This kind of gives a more overall picture of the general fund forecast. One thing I want to highlight is in 2024, if you look at the difference between the blue and the red graph, there's a noticeable budget deficit in 2024. And this kind of, all of our revenue projections outwards are kind of revised downwards since we revised the 24 projections down. Multiple rounds of budget cuts have occurred, cutting approximately $1.5 million from the budget already. These budget cuts, along with recent changes in health insurance, will help correct the structural budget deficit in future years. The city has a target fund balance of 30%. The fund balance started at 45% at the end of 2023 and is projected to spend down to 25% by 2029. This slide shows 5 months of sales tax collections this year. Sales tax revenue for the majority of months in 2024 were less than 2023. Some of the budget challenges we've been dealing with. If you recall, NPR has no longer provides property and liability insurance for our electric assets. We had to go out separately last year for coverage. That came in higher than we anticipated. Taking into account the increase in general property liability insurance for this year and increasing the budget to cover kind of that delta on the coverage for the electric assets, the overall increase to these line items is about 25%. The combined line items for property and liability insurance total $1.38 million. And premiums for 2025, an increase of $285,000 over the prior year. Please note the total costs for these line items was only $679,000 in 2023. We're the fastest growing city in the metro for cities with a population over 20,000. As we grow, this puts a bigger strain on city staff to maintain current service levels. There were 13 new positions requested from departments. After multiple budget meetings, we narrowed this down to 7 recommended positions. Of the 7, only 4 are in the general fund. This slide lists out the new positions that are being recommended. Please note that this slide only has an estimate for the position's annual salary. The cost of the benefits can vary widely for new employees. Factors like, do they have CAPERS retirement system or KPNF, or what they actually select for their health insurance options. All those can vary greatly on how much the benefits will cost for the positions. The overall driving force behind these position requests are growth in the community, and then also succession planning. We have 4 promotions in the being requested for the budget. One's to promote a building inspector to a building inspector 2, a plan examiner to a building official, utility inventory clerk to a procurement specialist, and payroll coordinator to a payroll administrator. There are also being a couple other title changes, but those won't have any budget impact. Those are more housekeeping issues. We are recommending merit and market increases of a 3% merit pool and 2.5% market adjustment. That is in line with other jurisdictions around the area. Please note that market adjustments affect vacant positions and also new employees. Only employees that have been here since, or that are hired before June 30th of this year will be eligible for merit increases. For equipment upgrades and replacements, there's $130,000 for a new City Hall generator. In the police department, there's kind of a comprehensive package to replace body cameras, car camera systems, data storage, tasers, facility recording system. It's a kind of a multi-year payment plan where it'll be $109,000 in 2025, then $207,000 each year for 4 years afterwards. The valuation estimates we got from the county indicated about an 8.9% increase. Please note that these are there are some pending tax appeals that could lower the estimated assessed value. Keeping a flat mill rate and capturing the valuation increase would increase property taxes on the average single-family home by about $3.51 a month. For the purpose of this analysis, we assume the average Gardner home appraisal to be about $325,000. The revenue neutral rate would decrease the mill rate by 1.494 mils. A mill is worth approximately $344,000. The revenue neutral rate would limit property taxes to the same dollar amount as the prior year and would also lower allocations of motor vehicle tax and county sales tax in future budgets. So I have a couple of different mill scenarios for you to consider. And we're talking about 2 different funds. We have 2 tax levy funds, the general fund and the bond and interest fund. When we looked at the flat mill levy scenario, essentially the general fund target fund balance is 30%. We're projected to end 2025 at 34%. And at the end of the 5-year forecast, it drops down to 25%. So essentially general fund balance is where it needs to be. So the focus on, if we rolled back mills, would be on the bond and interest fund. So in the flat mill levy scenario, we'd have basically fiscal capacity, the ability to go out and issue about $10.5 million in principal amount 10-year GO bonds. In the revenue neutral rate scenario, that bonding capacity would drop to about $6 million. In a quarter mil reduction scenario, it would drop down to about $10 million. And then in a half mil reduction scenario, the project capacity would drop down to about $9 million. So we're seeking council direction on budget feedback, and then also, more importantly, like, what mill levy scenario do you want to consider so we can include it in the resolution for July 1st? And at that meeting, you consider the resolution and setting a public hearing. On July 15th, we'll follow up with a budget discussion focused on the enterprise funds. And then the public hearings on the R&R and the 2025 budget will be in either August or September, depending on your decision on the mill rate. Any questions?
Thank you, Matt. Council? Seriously.
All right, let's go back to the flat rate scenario, please. Okay, so we're looking at fiscal capacity with the flat mill scenario of 10.5 million. Understanding we're going to we got to keep that target fund balance at above 25% of expenditures. We made it clear to the body that we want to keep that because that helps us secure our bond rating and our financing. So now let's go to the next slide with the half mil. So we lose $1.5 million reduction. We lose $1.5 million on our fiscal capacity over a 10-year period, correct? So it's $1.5 million a year over 10 years?
What it's really showing is if we went out next year and basically issued, wanted to issue geo bonds, a 10-year geo bond, the principal amount on that series would drop. So
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
So that's the bond interest servicing of the debt, basically.
Yes.
So that will restrict our bonding capacity to a certain extent, but not to the extent if we went to an R&R.
True.
And we understand R&R is a pipe dream. We understand that it's not, it doesn't work. I mean, we've got high inflation, we've got stagnant growth. There's no way you can make R&R work. I mean, just the numbers don't work, okay? Especially in a growing community, we understand. But I'm looking at that half mil reduction. I was running numbers myself on this. I think we can live with $9 million service capacity. We can't go down to 6.x, but we can definitely go to 9, and that would help to alleviate some of the problems that our citizens are seeing with their incomes being constrained and their costs continuing to rise. But I'll throw it out there. I just threw the hand grenade out there. You guys can try to kick it away.
Steve, if I understand what you're saying, giving that half mil back, a half mil reduction, but also that would be a half mil reduction of increasing property values. Is that correct?
No, it's not. So the property values stay the same regardless.
No, I'm saying as the property values go up, the taxes go up as well.
Yes,
So
they do.
by giving a half mil reduction, you're giving actually more than half mil relief.
No, they're still gonna pay more.
Yeah.
Right, I understand, but it's just gonna be,
But-
they're gonna be paying less more.
Yeah, the rate of increase is going to be less, but here's the thing: we understand that zero is not an option. R&R is
I agree.
for all intents and purposes. I know there's folks out there, we've got to just hold the line and not spend any more money. That's not possible in a city that's growing. We've got 1,000 people coming into this community every year. It's not possible. Okay, I would rather be realistic and say, okay, because we're going to be able to hit all our budgetary goals. I think what the requests are from the city staff, regardless of what level we use, it's going to affect our bonding capacity.
Right.
Okay, so I'm comfortable. We know the economy's slowing down. We know we're probably in a recession, even though no one wants to admit it. Okay, we are seeing stagflation, or the signs of stagflation. We need to provide our citizens some relief, and if that means that we have to maybe postpone or think of other projects, doing something with other projects. And I know that there's some things that are urgent that we'll still be addressing, but that $1.5 million in the grand scheme of things, knowing our bonding capacity is pretty significant already. This is bond and interest servicing that debt. I think that we still have some flexibility, even with a half mil reduction.
Well, I'll argue. So
Yeah, sure. Please.
I feel like
He wants an argument.
well,
No, I
feel like
saw throw a hand grenade out there. I want
Well,
someone to kick it away.
and your points are valid. I think the position that we're in is the same position that we were in a year
Last
ago,
year.
from a standpoint of the projects that we're looking at doing at both major interstate intersections that hit Gardner, that having the capability to be able to action those, because we know the costs are going to come in higher than probably we were already expecting. I mean, it's always the same, right?
They're already going.
And so if I look at the difference between the two, it feels like to me, the $10 million level is kind of like the base, and we held everything last year at the same rate. We were flat last year as well.
We were flat, but there was a reason why we were flat.
We were flat because because also but we're also not growing as much as we were last year.
There were two reasons why we were flat. First one was the growth, and the second one was the fact that we had a massive increase in our health insurance premiums and our costs for employees. Those are the two drivers that made it flat, okay? We've done some work, thanks to staff and to our outside consultants, to get that under control, okay? But growth is slowing down. Even the valuations are beginning to level off. You're talking about 8%, last year was 10% or more, okay? So we're starting to see that happen, and when the housing market slows down, we see a lessening of our sales tax revenues, and that's what really concerns me. The sales tax revenues are the canary in the coal mine. When you start to see those going down, you definitely are seeing a slowdown in economic activity. I don't think that our citizens are going to, I know we're talking about a pittance, right? Okay, well, it's not just a pittance, because the county assesses tax, the county funds assess tax, the school districts assess tax. Any place that we can go to try to give some relief, we should take it. And a half mil versus a quarter mil, I think the half mil is erring on the side of caution and making sure that our citizens have more wiggle room.
Steve, as we look at even what's on the agenda for tonight, we've got a lot of spending coming at us.
Yeah, I know.
And much of that spending is being dictated to us by other entities that have the power to dictate their will on us. I just see this, what you're talking about here, is very prudent, because as people, as homeowners, businesses, as everything else gets their tax increases on their properties, it gets to the point where it becomes unaffordable. And I think at this point, at the city level of government, we need to be a little more attuned and watch for areas where we can save a few dollars. And we're going to have to tighten the belt, because families are doing just exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
We can't make money, we don't have a printing press in the basement, but we're going to have to live within our means.
And part of it's going to be probably, I know you hate hearing this, Jim, but we may have to defer some capital projects that they're not super critical, but obviously the wastewater upgrades have to go forward, and other projects such as that. But we may have to look at possibly making some deferrals of capital projects, at least until we know how the economy is looking after the end of this year, because I think that there's going to be a definite move one way or the other after the end of this year.
Well, and then if property values fall, then we really have a problem.
That's the other piece. But again, that might actually support Mark's argument. If property values fall, then we have to think about, maintaining or even raising them. But I don't think they're going to fall here, at least not in the short term. So in that scenario, I think we're in a good spot to provide that relief.
Am I correct in, we don't have to make the quarter mil, half mil decision tonight, we just have to let you know
It's a target.
we're going to do something so we can set a hearing?
That'll be at the next meeting. I'll bring back a resolution. Where will you be setting that hearing? I was basically asking for a placeholder for that resolution. You can change it at that meeting too.
We basically just need to know tonight, one, talk some of this out, but two, are we planning to exceed R&R? That's the main thing Matt needs to know
I
tonight.
think R&R is going to be exceeded regardless. I don't think we're going to go.
I don't know. If you look at municipalities the report that I looked through there, we're, lower than everybody else, except for Overland Park.
But they've got a gigantic tax base. So.
Their tax
They sell
base is
100 million.
enormous. But
Yep.
if you look at all the other cities in the area, you even go down to Wichita and look at some of it's interesting to see what their mill levies are. We're by far the lowest.
Yep. We've tasked staff here with a very tough job, and that is how can we provide. Understand our average household income in Gardner is still lower than most jurisdictions here in Johnson County. So that puts us in a tough spot. We're primarily residential even today, though we have a lot of commercial moving in here. And we'll have a lot more in the next couple of years, but until that commercial tax base is to the point where we're able to get that valuation per mill high enough so that we can significantly, utilize that commercial tax revenue to supplement our residential, it's still going to be a struggle because, I think we're about, is it 78% now, Matt? It used to be 85%, now it's about 78% residential.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think it's not very much higher, lower, but it's lower, but we still have a lot of work to do.
But also keep in mind too, I mean, we're at the precipice of the amount of growth. I mean, with the Panasonic plant coming online,
Yes.
all the work going on around New Century. I just want to caution us about going to half and then having to raise it again.
Well,
is my
here's,
report.
here's my thinking here on that. If we have to move forward and make an adjustment to the mill, we go to the taxpayers and we make our case.
Well, we're going
We
to
don't,
do that anyway.
we don't hold it just so we can use it later. I'm kind of using your language here, Mark. But if we need to have a bonded project and it needs to be financed, and the citizens of this community feel like it's worthwhile to fund, then we take it and put it on a ballot issue and we have them vote on it. And if they want to increase their mills to be able to fund specific capital projects, I would rather go that way than to hold on to extra mills just because.
Steve, I'm new to this year. This is my first year through this process, so if I misspeak, please correct me. It sounds to me like one of the other things we can be doing very aggressively is trying to develop more retail in the area.
Yeah.
Because I think we're way behind across the interstate. We got empty buildings. And if we can, through our chamber and some other partners, start bringing more retail to town that does charge sales tax, that would be additional sources of that and give us some relief, if I understand this correctly.
I'll finish up my comments. Yeah, I think we got to be above the
R&R.
Yeah, I agree, above the R&R.
Okay, so we're above R&R. We have consensus on that.
Yep.
Whether or not, where we target it from there, we can discuss further. So my comments, listening to all of this, is everybody understands how business works, how your household works, right? And what's unique about government is that it's a glorified Ponzi scheme, okay? Straight up, because we can't make a product to sell to change our revenue, okay? And there's no way next year will be cheaper than this year because of inflation. The way this country is set up, it is a Ponzi scheme that you will have to pay. You have to bring something else in to pay for what you're going to fix, that road from 20 years ago you built, or that new one you're building to get across the highway to do something else. So for all intents and purposes, you have to grow. And the best you can do is essentially try to grow at the rate that everything else is going, okay? So my question, Matt, is we talked about bond and interest for the most part, but the budget is, we're looking at 2025, and our fund balance is a good number. It's at 34%, right? I'm a fan of getting close to 30. But at the end of 2029, we're at 25. What would be the projection that you'd have to be at 30% at 2029? Or have we calculated?
I'd have to go back and calculate it and bring it back.
Okay. I'm curious because all of, the points about not keeping mills are 100% valid, right? There's no reason to hold on to money so that we can hopefully not spend it, right? And at the same time, you have the concern of, well, you don't want to raise it, well, ever, but high at some point. So it would be interesting to see what that looks like. Are we doing a huge stair step when we get to the end, or are we nickel and diming this as we go? Because eventually, now if we do something to improve our bond and interest fiscal capacity, right, we keep it. That's great so that you can use your bonds. But if it's a recession, we're going to have issues with bond rates. And then if our target fund balance drops too low, now our ratings from the bond arbiters are going to drop us, and now our rates are even higher. So yes, we have capacity, but now we don't want to use it, right? So I would be curious in that number. I don't have to have it tonight, obviously, but to see where we're at and what it would take to do that. And is it a huge number? Can we support a reduction this year and then what that chart looks like going forward? Or is that forcing a stair step at some point in the next 5 years?
Well, municipal bond rates, by their very nature right now, are already stifling, to a certain extent, our bonding capacity. I know we have our bond counsel here, Tyler Ellsworth, who might be able to speak more on the market conditions right now, but I mean, that's already beginning to have an effect on our ability to be able to bond out projects, right?
Yes, for most of our assumptions, like if we were to go out and issue debt right now, we're using somewhere between 4.3 to 4.5%, much higher than what we were a couple years ago.
Right. So we're already seeing that.
So when we talk about capital improvement projects, I want everybody to think about roads versus a project for a community center, a tent over the pool. Because the thing that's gonna drive what we need the geo bonds for is road improvements. We're at a point now where we do not have an arterial road maintenance program. And we're trying to fund that to a certain degree this year in this next budget. But if we have to do a break in access, if we have to make significant improvements to 175th Street in Clare, excise tax is not designed to cover that. And we're trying to find alternative methods of getting developers involved in that. But the 10 million, think of that in the context of what's it gonna take to make those improvements. And honestly, it's not staff's, I mean, we follow council policy. If the council wants us to slow down on development and all the things that we have that are in the pipeline, even if it's just initial conversations, we will do that. But if we're going like we are now, that $10 million is gonna come way short of what we need to make the arterial, bridge, road improvements that are within the next couple years. So don't think of capital projects as the CIP or things that we want that we don't need. We're talking about in the context of what we need and what we don't have funds allocated for right now.
Are you talking about the granted portion or the, the city's portion of the grants funds that we're pursuing? I'm assuming that's the latter.
Well, that's part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
matching funds for like 167th Street and
Sure.
stuff. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about what we're doing at, we have 3 bridges in Gardner, and all 3 of them are in design.
Mhm.
So, and all those road improvements to, 175th Street is gonna have to be changed white. Claire is gonna have to be changed white. I mean, all those things are going to test our capacity to issue geo bond debt to cover those things. And our debt capacity right now is at 10. If we go to 9, we're lowering what we have right now, what we agreed to last year to maintain.
Did the 10 work for us this year, or was it a struggle?
Well, we didn't issue the debt because we still have, we're waiting on KDOT to do, a lot of it was tied to the project at,
Current road.
yeah, Gardner
What
Road
the-
and then the East McDonald's.
Right.
But did we say
Now
no
we're-
to
now
any
we're looking
projects?
at- Now we have Claire Crossing, so the other side of Claire, we have development continuing in south on Claire. We have other things that we're gonna talk about later on that are, potential needs in that regard.
And when does the sales tax, the special sales tax for roads expire? That's pretty soon, right?
Yeah, so we've talked about, the mayor and I, and Deacon talked about the timeline and looked at the past timeline of when we have to do that. So, the Johnson County Election Office, they want us to coordinate with other jurisdictions that want to have a special election. We could do it in November for free, but there's issues with that as well. So we are working through that to figure out what's the best time to recommend to council to take that to the citizens. Well, it's similar to when the sales tax was, there was no maintenance, there was no
Right.
budgeted maintenance amount for collectors and local streets. It's like that now for arterials. The excise tax is supposed to do that, but it doesn't come close to, it's like 500,000 short on an annual basis of covering the arterials. So,
Okay. These are the tough decisions.
Any other comments, questions before you mull over that for a month?
Can we model?
Calculate on it.
Can we model? I know that we have a slight idea of what the total cost of those projects are. A general ballpark idea of the total cost of the projects for the 3 interchanges. So South Gardner Road, which I think we've already provided our funding, our portion of the funding for that. KDOT's picking up the cost overruns. The 175th Street modifications, obviously, there's 2 pieces to that. One's the off-ramp issue, and then the other piece is actually redesigning the interchange. All right? And then the third one, obviously, is Moonlight, but that's being kind of pushed on us by KDOT because of the condition of the bridge, correct?
well, they'll actually do the bridge.
Yeah.
And it's in the county.
Yep.
Issues are gonna be whether we want it to be an interchange.
Yep.
It's expensive, and 183rd Street is gonna need to be finished. It's
Yes.
still a gravel road. And as development comes on, and it comes on piecemeal, I mean, there's ways that we can, do benefit districts and things like that, but we have to get the developers in there. And it's the same thing with sewer. As we grow, whether it's north to south or south to north, on the east side, we're going to have to put ourselves out there and issue debt that we could recover at a later time. But we're gonna have to do that to facilitate that growth.
And that doesn't even include the Trails Parkway, which is kind of the cornerstone of all the commercial development supposed to happen on the east side of I-35.
Right.
I kind of like that, the idea of building a model of what we need to do. Jim, you just mentioned, the interchange that could potentially go into Blue Plains, some other things. Maybe some ideas and projects that could make retention or renewal of the sales tax a little more palatable. If people realize that they're gonna vote for sales tax retention, but they get an interchange out of it on Moonlight, they're probably gonna be more likely to swallow that than something that doesn't have something that directly
Oh,
benefits them.
I don't think that would fund the interchange in Moonlight.
No,
It
I'm
would-
just saying that, using that as an example.
Yeah, but it wouldn't fund the interchange. The special sales tax for infrastructure, for roads, is actually just for our arterials, and for our collectors
I
and local
understand.
streets. Yeah.
What would it take to do that?
Yeah,
A bond issue?
I would be real careful that we don't have the carrot. We're too busy trying to figure out if we can clean up our mess behind.
Exactly,
Right, so
exactly.
even if there is a carrot, we've got to fix what's behind us
Yeah.
before we can ever offer
Yeah.
a carrot. And yeah, it's going to be difficult.
I mean, in order to get an interchange, you'd probably have to get a bond issue. I'm just telling you, make the case to the electorate, let them vote on it, but if they want that interchange, then that would be the way to go. But that means increasing their property taxes.
So bottom line, Matt, definitely can exceed revenue neutral rate.
Yes.
That it? Thank you, Matt.
We've got some